Good Erev Shabbos to our friends and members of the Westmount Shul. Hope you all had a very productive week. And now I'd like to discuss the Parsha and how it relates to one of the current events that we are seeing. Now, not all of you are sports fans, and I am no longer a sports fan. But there is something that has taken the sports world by storm. And it's a very interesting thing that is happening. There is a very famous basketball player whose name is Kyrie Irving. And people brought him to my attention years ago when they mentioned how he was playing on a team where I used to live, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And when I was a young child, a young boy who was trying to, was interested in sports, my Cleveland teams never won. And he was on that team that brought the first championship to Cleveland. So therefore, they wanted me to know all about Kyrie Irving. Anyway, he's been, I guess, playing for 10 years. He's an all-star. He's one of the best players in the game. And the state of New York just came with a rule that anybody playing or in any social environments has to be double vaccinated, has to be vaccinated. Although the team told him when he started that they're not going to require guys to be vaccinated. The NBA is not requiring people to be vaccinated, but every state has their own laws. So therefore, the team said everyone's got to get vaccinated because we're in New York, the Brooklyn Nets. So therefore, they said everyone's got to be vaccinated. Kyrie is not vaccinating. So now, what's the team to do? So the team says, well, if you're not vaccinating, you can't play with practice with the team, and you cannot play any home games in New York. That means you only can play half of the games. Now, to my understanding, he makes $400,000 per game. Per game. Alavai of alle Yidden gesagt. And the team's saying, if you're not playing half the season, we're not paying you. And that means he stands to lose $17 million. And he was also eligible until now to sign a 4-year, $187 million extension with Brooklyn. And he said, he is not going to get vaccinated. And he said, you got to make these convictions yourself. Okay? He said, you're going to lose out on money. You're going to lose out on this. So what? It's not about the money, baby. It's all about choosing what is best for you. You really think I want to lose money? You think I really want to give up on my dream to go after a championship? You think I really just want to give up my job? Think I really just want to sit at home and not go after the things with my teammates that I've been able to grow with, to learn that it takes sacrifice in this space? You think I want to give up my livelihood because of a mandate, because I don't have accommodations, because I'm unvaccinated? Come on. And he said, he's still uncertain about a lot of things in life, and that's okay. Okay. This is my life. I go to do whatever I want with this. This is one body that I get here. And you are telling me what to do with my body? This has everything to do with what is going on in our world, and I'm being grouped into something that is bigger than just the game of basketball. And he concluded, I'm staying grounded in what I believe in. It is as simple as that. It's not about being anti-vax or being on one side or the other. It's really about being true to what feels good for me. If I'm going to be demonized for having more questions and taking my time to make a decision with my life, that is just what it is. I know the consequences of the decisions that I make with my life. I'm not here to sugarcoat any of that. Okay. So what does it have to do with this week's parsha? The answer is, it has everything to do with this week's parsha. This week's parsha, we're introduced to Avram Avinu. And we are told that Avram Avinu, when Lot, his nephew, was captured by the 4 kings, it says that the Palit came and he came to Avram Ivri, Avram the Ivri, Avram the man on the other side, the man on the other side. Ivri, whatever Ivri means, the Ivri, the Hebrew. And what does it mean to be a Hebrew? So the Medrash gives a number of interpretations, but the first one, and obviously the main one, was Kol Olam Kulam Me'ever Echad V'hu Me'ever Echad. The whole world was on one side, and he was on the other side. And what was the whole world on one side? Of idolatry. Well, Avram was alone on the other side in recognizing Hashem. That's what an Ivri is. Someone who takes a stand, is not intimidated. Just because everybody has a certain view doesn't mean you have to have that view. And therefore, what we would call as an independent thinker. An independent thinker is not limited from intimidation of others. And that is the primary definition of an Ivri. An Ivri is that kind of a person, and that is in the Jewish DNA. That just because the whole world says one thing doesn't mean I have to do it. And Avram was willing to go through much sacrifice for this. So it appeared that in this week's parsha, where Avram brings to the core of humanity, that even though the whole world thinks that you can fight God, and the whole world thinks that we can build a tower and get rid of God, Avram said, I don't want nothing to do with it. And he was canceled, cancel culture. And it didn't matter to him. And he stood to lose a lot. Big contracts, knocked off of his Facebook page, who knows what. But he said, there are things that are more important. I can go against the whole world. So I will, stick to my cause. So the question is if this is what makes up an Ivri, so I guess Kyrie Irving must be an Ivri. Must be, he's a Ivri. He's willing to lose millions because he believes that no one can tell me what to do with my body. And therefore, we mistakenly might think he's an Ivri. So let me share with you an idea that I mentioned in the Parsha class from Rav Nevin Zal. You should live long and be well. And really, I would recommend you go to the Parsha class because it's a very deep discussion. But I'm just going to mention the one point that I think is so important. And he focuses on the words of the Medrash that says, Kol ha'olam kulo me'ever echad. The entire world is on one side. V'hu me'ever echad, and he is on another side. What does it mean, Kol ha'olam kulo? The entire world. The entire world. What does the entire world mean? And what was it for? The entire world did not believe in a God, in a God-centered universe. Didn't believe in it at all, and Avram did. And says Rav Nevin Zal that when you believe in a God-centered universe, and you're on that side, then kol ha'olam kul, the entire world, meaning every force of nature, which is on the other side, will not stop you from being able to be on your side. And under natural circumstances, for example, and this is in the battle with the four kings, under natural circumstances, you're on the other side, man, and you don't have any allies, and you're fighting millions of people, you should lose being on the other side. But even if the whole world, and that means the forces of nature is part of the whole world. Part of the forces of nature means that 2.5 million people fighting one person, the one guy loses. That's the force of nature. Kol ha'olam kulo is on one side, he's on the other side. And you know why he wins? Because he's on the other side. The other side means you're davuk to Hashem. You're clinging to Hashem. There's nothing but Hashem in your life is the focus and focal point of your life. And if you really believe that Ein Od Milvado, and you're willing to give up and surrender your whole life for the will of Hashem, then kol ha'olam kulo doesn't mean the people only who are on one side. It means the natural tools at their disposal to get rid of you. All of them can be on one side. And over here, B'dafka, Avram's called the Ivri to show you that even if you're on the other side, but you are davuk to Hashem, you will remain on that side and you will be successful. But for this to happen, there's one more little piece of information, he says. So you see, there's limitations come from fear of others. There's limitations from nature. Nature. For example, you want to have a position, Kyrie? Well, very good. You're an independent thinker and you're not afraid of others. But then there's limitations of nature, Kyrie. Nature is that $34 million is not easy to come by, Kyrie. And the nature of things is you play ball, you listen to what they say, you get vaccinated, you get the money. That's the nature of it. And if not, there's the whole NBA that's going to tell you ain't going to play, man. Limitations of nature. Will he be able to overcome that? Well, the answer is, how close is he to Hashem? I don't know. I don't know his religious affiliation. If Kyrie wants to succeed, the only way you succeed is dveikus to Hashem. But there's a way to tell if you're davuk to Hashem. And this is the best part. Rav Nevelson says that you have to be against the whole world. And you know who else is part of the whole world? Not just every human being, not just every physical force of nature. You know who's also part of the whole world that you have to fight against? You have to fight against yourself. The part of you, the animalistic part of you, that's also part of nature. Which means to say that Avram was on one side and the rest of the world, including Avram, were on the other side. And Avram would have to fight a war not only against Amraphel and his cohorts, but also against himself as well. What do we mean? The answer is, what was Avram's prominent midah? Was kindness, was chesed. He always thought of ways of helping his fellow man. Do you think Avram in his whole life till this war ever killed anybody? Ever went to war? No, he was a pacifist. What do you think Avram wanted to do? And which he did do at certain times. He wanted to do with Amraphel. We know Amraphel was Nimrod. And one time when Nimrod got lost and he needed some food to eat, he happened to stumble into Avram's tent and Avram fed him. And Avram treated him nicely. He tried to convince him about Hashem, but I guess it didn't work. So, but he never would want to kill him. Why did you kill Amraphel? He's your arch enemy. But now Avram has to take on the entire world. It means he has to take on his own nature of loving his fellow man that nature, the entire world, he fought against, but even including himself, he has to fight against his nature. His nature demanded act nicely, be a pacifist. But he knew that if you're David to Hashem, you have to do what Hashem wants. And Chazal teaches Lot was not captured just because he happened to be the wrong person in the wrong place. But the four kings specifically captured Lot. Why? Because he was a relative and a disciple of Avram, and their war against Avram and everything that stood for. And now Avram realizes, I have to fight back, but I never fought back in my life. It's so against my nature. And to do so would require him to fight against his own nature as a peace-loving individual who wanted to do good for others. And that's what a real Ivri is. Not only does he strip off the limitation from fear of others and intimidation, not only does he strip away the limitations of nature, but he strips off the limitations of his own nature, himself, of chesed. And that is more, you should listen to the Parsha class. That's what an Ivri is. And we need to know that's who we are and what we are capable of. We are unlimited. We are always on the other side, but the only way we'll really be unlimited is to know we're on the other side, even the other side of ourselves. And that's what Avram Avinu was. Kyrie Irving, the future will tell us what will happen. Will he cave in eventually? Will the pressure be so great? Then although he was an Ivri in terms of being an independent thinker, but there were the limitations of nature, and maybe he's not so davuk to Hashem, in which nature couldn't stop him. But probably the greatest way, and I leave it for you people to investigate on your own. If he's a real Ivri, he'll even go against his own nature. And it's not my place to weigh in politically, anti-vax, yes, vax. It could be, really the greatness would be that as much as he feels he doesn't want to be vaccinated, it's my body, he'll say, you know what, for the sake of the team, I'll do it. Right? And, and that's to quote the Halakha Kyrie. He says, nobody is hijacking this voice. See if they play this on their TV channels, and if they play this actual truth somewhere before you start talking about me and what I'm doing with my life. And no, I'm not retiring. And no, I am not going and leaving this game like this. There's still so much work to do. Sounds beautiful words, but you got to know the real context. I'm not God. I'm not one to weigh in and judge Kyrie Irving. But if we have this perspective of an Ivri, each and every one of us for ourselves needs to know what we need to do. As Jews, we have to be courageous to know that even if the whole world has certain opinions about sexuality and orientation and things like that, certain opinions of Dina de Malchus, Dina, whatever, we should not be afraid. The Jews have only survived because we would always not be intimidated by certain things. But there's more that we have to but it's only meaningful if we're davuk to Hashem, and it's not because we just want to not be intimidated because I'm a man, I'm tough. You can't cancel me, it's because I'm davuk to Hashem, and there's a ratzon Hashem that's important. And then finally, you have to go against your own nature. That means you're a real Yid. And that's what Avram is teaching us. How he went and all his tests were to go against the man of chesed. He had to fight against the entire world. Even yourself is on the other side. In contradistinction to all this past Shabbos, at the same time, was the yortzeit of Rav Avadia Yosef. And Rav Avadia Yosef, Zichrona Levracha, Schusi again Aleinu, was mamish the Sfardi Avram Avinu. You know, there were so many great things about it. And I would really suggest, last Shabbos, since I couldn't be in shul, I spent most of it reading for the second time this book. It's from Art Scroll, Marana Rav Ovadia. It was put out a year after he passed away. Like when it came out, I read it. I would suggest you read it. And since it was Shabbos, I couldn't be in shul after I did my Daf Yomi and whatever else. There's still more time. I figured Lechvod Rav, I would learn more, be inspired by his life. And in the beginning, they say, considering all the accomplishments he did, he probably would have had an easier life. He probably, he's born into a family of great scholarly lineage. We would assume, encouraged from his youth to learn Torah, facing little opposition, from being a young revolutionary to turn the tide of Sephardic Jewry to the Gadol Hador. But it's not true. His life was constant battles from day one. His own father, who loved him, did not want him to be in yeshiva because he had to help with the impoverished home and in the store. So he lived with great financial difficulties in an era where Jews were quite literally starving in the 1920s. You'll find that little Ovadia would sneak out behind the backs of his concerned parents to learn Torah until the wee hours of the morning in a local shul. As a teenager, he was fired from his first position teaching Torah because of his staunch belief that Sephardic Jewry, and especially those living in Eretz Yisrael, should follow the rulings of the Bet Yosef, where many Sephardim said, no, there's others. When he was married and to serve as the chief, one of the rabbis in the Bav Bezdin in Egypt, he led the community in all halachic manners, and his life was in constant danger from the Egyptian authorities who suspected him as a spy for Israel, and the secular community leaders who wanted to get rid of him and send him back to Israel. And there were the ritual slaughters who wanted to murder him. And eventually he had to go back to Eretz Yisrael. He wrote the great Sefer, Chazon Ovadia on Hilchos Pesach, and his book was banned from the Sephardic community and even burned for a perceived slight of the Ben Ish Chai. Although he had the greatest respect for him, but people did not understand his greatness. He then undertook to convince parents to enroll their children in Torah schools, because Sephardic children in those days were not given the proper education. And he incurred the wrath of leaders of the national religious movement, whose schools those children were abandoning, and they threatened to prevent him from advancing in the Israeli rabbinate. And yet he rose to the apex of the rabbinate to become the Rishon LeZion. And he was always plagued by controversy, but he prevailed. And he could have been the Rishon LeZion for life, if not for the Knesset passing a law specifically to say you're limited to 2 terms. But that now enabled him to free him to find the Shas party and realize his lifelong vision of creating a vast empire of Sephardic Torah schools. And it was a steep goal with many battles that he was successful in. A person who was mamish and Ivri. Unbelievable. He had to fight so many battles. He wasn't afraid to speak his mind under threat of everything. But it was always Dveikus Hashem. In 1984, when Shas ran its first campaign for national office, and the leaders who had no experience at all, and it was a ragtag group, they didn't know all the political machinations that went on. Anyways, the night of the election, they're sitting in the Rav's house. They didn't want to be seen in public because maybe they wouldn't reach the minimum threshold of votes and they'd be embarrassed. So all waiting to hear the results. While Rav Ovadia was sitting and learning, oblivious to everything. Man, this is it, the first chance for a Sephardic party. You never heard of it before. They were treating the Sephardim like second-class citizens. We're not just learning. Then the radio announcer said Shas got 4 seats. That was like unbelievable. And everyone's jumping up and down. It's amazing. And his son David goes over and says, Abba, we got 4 seats. So Rav Ovadia lifts his head up and says, Yossi. And they went right back to learning. So they said, after all the work we put in, I thought he would dance with us, maybe drink a l'chaim. But his attitude was, we already spent all that time to win the election. Now let's get back to learning, because it's all about learning. And so Sephardim would not be ignorant. And they get close to Hashem. That's what it's all about. That's a Yehudi. That's what a Yehudi is. And several months before Rav Ovadia himself passed away, his oldest son, Rabbi Yaakov Hai Yosef, predeceased him. And this was a time of great turmoil for the Torah community in Eretz Yisrael, with most parties in the government mobilizing to undermine the Torah empire that had been built in the 65 years of its statehood. Great threats. When Prime Minister Netanyahu came to be Menachem Oval Rav Ovadia, as soon as he walked in, Rav Ovadia pounced. First thing he says, how can you be the party to the destruction of the Torah world? Netanyahu says, Kvod Harav, bati lenachem otcha, lo lasuach itcha. I came to give you consolation. I didn't come to discuss this issue. Said Rav Ovadia, you came to console me on the loss of my son? Believe me, the dismantling of the Torah world pains me much more than the loss of my own son. And that's it. That's a person, it was all for Hashem. But you should know. You say, well, I guess Rav Ovadia, that's the kind of guy he was. It's not true. Because people who face constant battles in life tend to become crusty and combative, poised to mount a counterattack for those seeking to destroy them. And certainly someone as embattled as Rav Ovadia could easily have grown antagonistic and aggressive, constantly wanting to sink his attackers. Yet few people in this whole world were as positive and loved by every fellow Jew, even his detractors. They called him Harav Ovadia. And all the videos show you the palpable love that everybody had for Rav Ovadia, to the fact that there were 850,000 people at his funeral. Unbelievable. And a grandson of Rav Ovadia related that after he passed away, a fellow came over and says, I was married for 5 years without children, and all the treatments had failed, and I went to Maran for a blessing, expecting him just to give me a few seconds of his time and send me away, and I was shocked when he asked for all the details of my story, what the doctor said, what treatments we had tried. And only after hearing the full story did he issue the bracha. And the grandson said that Saba understood that a few minutes of his attention meant so good for people. So he gladly gave of his precious time to lift a load off a heavy heart of someone. What do you see? Rav Ovadia was a person who just loved to learn Torah, just wanted to be a kind person. That's all he wanted, just like Avram Avinu. But when he had to fight the wars, he would have to go against his nature, not like the press portrayed Rav Ovadia as antagonistic. He had the chesed of Avram, but he had the Torah of a person who was double to Hashem and was willing to fight the battles. And do not misunderstand Rav Ovadia as a competitive, hot, smarty, tempered person. Chas v'shol. And each and every one of us can be our own Ovadia in our own way. And this should be our goal for this year. As we now are beginning, we're in earnest in the new year. We have to remember who we are. We are Ivri. We're also Yehudim, but we are first an Ivri. We have to remember the whole world can be on one side and we're on the other, not because only, like Kyrie Irving says, I believe in me. It's about me and being able to express myself. That's not enough. It's about we are davuk to Hashem, and we have to fight all those battles. And we fight on those battles. Nature cannot hold us back. We can't say I've tried for the last 30 years to improve in certain things, and I've not won. The nature is such. No, it's not so. Because you got to realize you got to fight against yourself. And that's the toughest battle. In schus of Maran, or Rav Ovadia, and the schus of all the Gedolim, and the schus of Avram Avinu. We're going to live with Avram Avinu this week. We're going to live with Avram next week. We're going to live with Avram in Parshas Chaisar. For 3 weeks, we're going to live with Avram Avinu. It means we read these Parshios, and Avram Avinu is visiting us. He's at our Shabbos table. And we can ask Avram in the Parsha, Avram, how did you do it? How were you able to do this? And he keeps telling us, the whole world was on one side. I'm on this side. I'm with Hashem. I'm even was against myself most of my life. If we can learn to be against ourselves, boy, will we be amazing. God will make a covenant with us, and we'll be part of the covenant. That at the end of the day, we will be the ones who will inherit Eretz Yisrael. There'll be a day with that accursed Dome of the Rock, that tomb over there, whatever, will be gone. And the thing we long for, the Beis Hamikdash, will be rebuilt very speedily in our time. Amen. Thank you all for listening, and have a wonderful Shabbos.